Okay, at this point I'd like to introduce our speaker, Gary Euler. Gary is with the Roberto Clemente Museum, and I think he'll put on a fine show for us today, and so hopefully you'll have a lot of questions for him as we get to the end of the presentation. You're good, right?
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Hearing okay?
Oh, yeah.
All righty. We can get a couple of those lights just above the screen so the image is a little bit sharper. I am Gary Euler. I am a volunteer docent at the Roberto Clemente Museum. Just show of hands. Anybody been to the museum? Great. A number of you have. I'm hoping to entice the rest of you to come down and visit us at some point. Now, I think I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. How many of you saw Roberto play? Yeah, I thought so. So we're all giving away our age, right? Yeah. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately. What I'm going to do today, I have a short PowerPoint presentation. It's only about a dozen slides. But interspersed among those slides is a number of videos that I want to show you as well. Now, you probably saw us up here struggling with the technology. We think we got it down, but would ask your indulgence if things don't work out exactly as planned, because after all, we're old. What I want to start, though, is with the story. And the story that I want to start with has to do with the Clemente Museum itself and how it came into being. Now, the museum is located in Lawrenceville, pretty much on the corner of Butler and Penn, if you know where that is. And it's located in an old firehouse. Now, that firehouse was built in 1896. And it served as a firehouse for the city of Pittsburgh through 1972. When we do tours, there's a number of things that come up that are very ironic, but probably the most ironic of them all is that the last day there was a fireman in that fire hall was December 31st, 1972. And I'm sure you all remember that's the date the plane crashed into the ocean. Now, the city used the building as storage for about 20 years. 92, they completely abandoned it. And you know what happens? Critters invaded, windows were broken, really became an eyesore in the neighborhood. The neighbors wanted the city to do something with it, and the city, in fact, had condemned the building. Their intent was to knock it down. They didn't have the cash to do that. And it was about that time that a photographer named Dwayne Reeder, you'll see him a little later on one of the videos, he had lost his lease on his studio, looking to reestablish it, came across the building, acquired it from the city, and with a whole lot of work and effort, restored the building and established his photography studio in that building in '94. Now, if you remember, in '94, the Pirates hosted the All-Star Game, and that was back, of course, at the old ballpark at Three Rivers Stadium. They were hosting some folk. They wanted to create a memento for those people, came up with the idea of a Roberto Clemente calendar. They needed somebody to take those photographs. Dwayne won the commission. He got to go to Puerto Rico. He met Vera Clemente, Roberto's widow, also the three sons, established a really good relationship. In fact, Vera entrusted him with the care of her photographic archive, and Dwayne started collecting memorabilia. Now, fast forward to 2006. Pirates again hosting the All-Star Game, of course, new ballpark. 30 days before the game, Dwayne got a phone call from Vera Clemente. She was coming to Pittsburgh for the game. She was bringing along family, still, of course, had a lot of friends in the area. She would like to host everybody at a party. Mr. Reeder, could I have my party at your photography studio? I don't know about any of you guys. I sure as hell wouldn't say no to that request. And obviously, Dwayne didn't either, but having that party in a photography studio, that wasn't going to cut it. So he took his studio, he moved it up to the upper floor of the firehouse, and in the 30 days that he had available, he created the beginnings of the Clemente Museum. So that when Vera walked in the night of the party, expecting to see a studio gussied up a little bit, she saw the beginnings of the museum. And now to get to the punchline, the first thing that she saw was that mural. We have that displayed on 4 panels when you walk into the museum. When you look at those clouds, what do you see, guys? See it? Yeah, it's called the angel wings photo. Imagine the impact that had on her when she walked in that night. Now, the story of that photo, that was taken in spring training of 1960. That was down in Fort Myers, Florida at the time. The only photoshopping that was ever done, there was a glove somewhere near Roberto's feet. And back here, you may remember a guy named Vernon Law. He was running laps behind Roberto. So they got that out. But the cloud formation is just what you see in that photograph. It was never published. Photograph was never published. It was taken by a photographer from a Pittsburgh newspaper called the Pittsburgh Sun-Telegraph. And if you remember that, you really are giving away your age. Did you deliver it? The Sun-Telegraph was acquired by the press then by the Post-Gazette. All the files transferred up. By the time they got to the Post-Gazette didn't want them, shipped it all off to the dumpster. Guy taking the files to the dumpster, went through, saw that negative, rescued it. Dwayne was collecting at that point. He acquired it. The rest is history. So, one story to get you started. Now, I told you we're going to show some videos here. The first one is, would you like to see Roberto play a little bit of baseball? Yeah, so let's see if we can bring these up, see how good this old guy is at bringing this stuff up. And bear with me, we may have to do some commercials along the way here.
I feel like they really changed me and my family's life. I'm grateful they do. I was diagnosed February, and I finished treatment November 30th, 2021. I think it's gonna be emotional, but I'm excited to start a new.
When I was a little kid, I want to be a baseball player. This is something that I think about. The more I think about it, I'm convinced that God wants me to play baseball.
What a thrill! Clemente putting on a one-man show. Roberto Clemente.
I put it in the same level the Babe Ruth. I call him the Bambino Latinos.
Roberto Clemente, one of the most feared hitters in the National League.
3,000 hits, 4 batting titles, and a .317 lifetime average says an awful lot about Clemente.
They're still trying to figure a way to pitch to this batting king.
1 run on 5 hits. Cubs, no runs, 1 hit. And there's a well-hit ball, right center, falling pretty fast out there. However, it is caught by Clemente with a tremendous running, sliding catch. Woo, boy.
If Roberto can reach the ball, he'll swing at it.
When I hit it good, most of the time I jump into the ball. And I think I can hit all kind of pitches.
Roberto had the highest batting average of any player in the 60s.
That is hit well. A Clemente home run, and the Pirates lead 1-0.
Looks like he hit a breaking pitch right over the plate. That's his 12th hit. He's 1 short now, tying Bobby Richardson's all-time World Series record of 13 hits in a 7-game World Series. He had a triple and a homer yesterday and a home run today. Let's watch his swing now. Look at him tee off. Everything in that 180-pound body, whipping around. This one he pulled the left center. Most of his hits have been to right.
Incredibly, Roberto hit safely in all 14 World Series games in which he played.
This man has just impressed me so much that I'll never forget Clemente.
Greatest right fielder in the game of baseball, Roberto Clemente. Bobby, congratulations on a great World Series.
How soon can you get your 3,000th hit?
Well, you never know. If I'm alive, like I said before, you never know because God tells you how long you're going to be here. So you never know what can happen tomorrow.
Matlack on the 0-1. Bobby hits a drive into the gap in the left center field. There she is. Just for a double. Papers flying, everybody standing. A double for Roberto.
On December 23rd, a massive...
So you remember Bob Prince, I take it? And I don't know if you caught that on the interview, that he was interviewed by a Philly broadcaster about his 3,000th hit and said, I don't know if God will let me be here, essentially. So pretty striking. So let's go, whoops, wrong one. Let's go back to the beginning. Roberto was born on August 18th, 1934. So he would be 89 years young if he had survived this year. Born in a little town called Carolina, Puerto Rico, which is on the outskirts of San Juan, and ironically enough, it's where the airport was located. His father was named Melchor Clemente, and he was a foreman in the sugarcane fields. His mother was named Louisa Walker, and she had been widowed, had 2 children from her prior marriage, 5 with Melchor, including a sister who died of Roberto's, who died tragically in a fire when Roberto was an infant. Now, the family was far from rich, but not necessarily dirt poor either. Melchor did okay as a foreman, and Louisa helped bring in some things, did some sewing and things for people. But just to illustrate, Roberto's first baseball, he got a sock. He stuffed it with bottle caps and stitched it together. That was his first baseball. Now, he actually got his start as a 15-year-old playing on a men's softball team. Now, if you ever saw Roberto throw a baseball, Roberto played shortstop on that team. How'd you like to have been the first baseman, catching throws from Roberto from shortstop on a softball diamond? Hope that guy survived. Well, Roberto starts playing in Puerto Rico, of course, what we call winter baseball. He got 3 offers to sign. He got an offer from the New York Giants, the Brooklyn Dodgers, and the Milwaukee Braves. Now, there was a rule in place in Major League Baseball at the time. It was called the bonus baby rule. The rule was if you signed a player, paid him a bonus of $4,000 or more to sign, you had to keep him on your 25-man Major League roster for 2 years. If you didn't, the player could then be drafted after his first year in the minors. Giants offered him less than that. Dodgers offered him a $10,000 bonus, so if they sign him, they're going to have to keep him for 2 years or send him to the minors. The Braves, I've seen different numbers. I've seen a number as high as a $35,000 bonus. So he signs with? Dodgers. Yeah, the Dodgers. Why the Dodgers? Why not the Braves? The story is that the Braves offer came after Roberto had verbally indicated to the Dodgers he was going to accept their offer. Hadn't signed it. Had said he was going to. Went to his father, what should I do? Father says, you've given your word, that's your honor, you can't go back on it. So he signed with the Dodgers. What do you think? Character? Guys think it would happen today. Yeah, I'm hearing a little skepticism. I have to say I agree with that. I'm pretty skeptical it would happen today. He did sign with the Dodgers. Long story short, they did send him to the minor leagues, Montreal, AAA level farm club. Didn't play him a lot. He only got about 160 at-bats. In theory, they were trying to hide him, but of course the Giants knew about him, Braves knew about him, Pirates knew about him because Branch Rickey was now our general manager. He had just come over from the Dodgers. Pirates had finished in last place that year, so when the draft came, we had the first pick, and that's how Roberto gets to Pittsburgh to play baseball. So when Roberto first was signed with the Dodgers, he reported to spring training down in Vero Beach, Florida, a little bit north of Miami. This is 1954. Anybody see the movie 42? Jackie Robinson movie? Yeah, if you remember any of the scenes from that movie of when Jackie first reported to spring training, come 54, there wasn't a whole lot of difference. Players of color were still staying in separate places from the white players, still being refused service at most restaurants. People of color coming to the games, still separate sections of the stands. There's still separate drinking fountains. So think about this. Roberto's 19 years old, never been off the island of Puerto Rico before. Obviously of color, spoke English, but very broken English at that point. He knows he has to play pretty well. The Dodgers are going to keep him now for those 2 years because of that bonus. Now he's dealing with prejudice for the first time in his life. How do you think he felt? Give me a word.
2 words, pissed off.
I get to that at the end, yeah. Lonely, confused, intimidated maybe, and yeah, angry. I'm pretty sure I would have been. Well, I told you the story. The Dodgers didn't keep him, sent him to the minor leagues. The Pirates drafted him, and we certainly got the better of that deal. Roberto married in 1964. There's a story. Beginning in 1964, he was home in San Juan, driving down the street, saw a young lady walking down the street, immediately smitten with her, literally followed her into a drugstore, sat down beside her, wanted to take her out. But I'm sure, just like all your wives and daughters, she knew that she couldn't accept going on a date until she had permission from her father and her brothers. All the women in your life did that, right? Maybe not. So she actually did turn him down the first time. But he was persistent, found some intermediaries, won everybody's trust, and they married in the fall of 1964. I did get to meet Vera before she passed in the fall of 2019, had an opportunity to talk with her a little bit. Probably just me, but I felt like I was meeting and talking to royalty. She was just an extremely sweet, kind individual. But sometimes that worked against her. People would come to her home, borrow things, never give them back. One of the things, believe it or not, that was borrowed, never returned, was her wedding album. She had a couple old photographs. Dwayne restored those for her, found some photos that were put on eBay by a friend of Roberto's here in Pittsburgh, acquired them and created an album for her from those. They had 3 boys. Roberto Jr. was born in '65. He still lives in the Pittsburgh, well, I say still, he lives in the Pittsburgh area now. There is a Roberto III. Just ran into him the other day down at the museum. Last fall on Clemente Day, which is celebrated every year now on September 15th in the major leagues, Roberto Jr. got to throw out the first pitch up in Citi Field, New York, alongside his son, Roberto III, who was about 5 years old, and threw an absolute strike into the catcher. So we got our fingers crossed that some of those genes got passed down. Luis, the middle son, was born in '66. He's in Puerto Rico, takes care of the Clemente Foundation and some other things there. The youngest son was Enrique, Ricky, born in '69. Never flown. When he's come to the States, he's taken a ship to Miami, ground transport from there. And in fact, Roberto's father was also afraid to fly. Came to Pittsburgh one time for Clemente Day back in 1970. And that meant a lot to Roberto. You may remember at the end of the '71 series when Roberto was being interviewed on national TV by Bob Prince. First thing he did, spoke to his parents in Spanish and asked for their blessing that day. So that was very meaningful to him. Those are some of his numbers. You can read those. I don't have to read them for you. The numbers don't just describe the player. He didn't put up some really, really big numbers like Willie Mays or Hank Aaron or some other guys, but if you ever saw him play, and I know almost everybody here did, he was the guy you couldn't take your eyes off of. When I was a kid, my dad would take us to Forbes Field, sit in the right field grandstand, because that's where he was. Remember the basket catches in the outfield? There was a whole generation of Little League coaches here in Pittsburgh pleading with their kids to catch a fly ball like this because Roberto was catching them like that. Greatest throwing arm of all time. Guy hit a single, make a wide turn around first base. What would he do? Throw it behind him. Yeah, trying to get him scampering back. And remember him running the bases, arms and legs flailing, cap flying off most of the time. A couple great quotes after Roberto's passing. Frank Robinson, remember him? He was asked about Roberto. His comment was, Roberto didn't play right field. He performed right field. He didn't turn and throw, he pirouetted and threw. Doesn't that capture him? Doesn't it give you an image? Hall of Fame pitcher for the Phillies, a guy named Robin Roberts, was quoted as saying the first time he saw Roberto run the bases, he laughed. Then he thought, everybody ought to run the bases like that. So that's who he was as a ball player, and that's why we so fondly remember him today. And he was a clutch player. You may have caught it from the video. I'm going to show you another clip from the '71 World Series here. Played in 14 World Series games, 7 in 1960, 7 in 1971. Hit safely in all of those 14 games. Didn't have a large role in the '60 series, but if you remember the 8th inning, when the Pirates went out ahead, of course, Hal Smith had that big 3-run homer in the 8th inning to put him ahead, but the play immediately before that, Pirates had runners on first and third. There was 2 outs. Roberto was up. Love to tell you, he had a line drive into the gap, but he didn't. Hit a chopper between the pitcher's mound and first base, where they kind of look at each other. So both players went for the ball. Roberto beat the play at first base. Run scored. That set the stage for Hal Smith's home run. But the '71 World Series was all his. And so I'm going to show you a few clips from that '71 World Series.
It was back to Baltimore for Game 6, and once again, the stage belonged to Pittsburgh's Man of the Hour, who continued to amaze Oriole announcer Chuck Thompson.
Impressed me so much that I'll never forget Clemente. He can do everything so well. He runs well. He's got a magnificent arm. Defensively, he does it all. And what a hitter. That's not to say that Mays and Aaron are any less than a Clemente, but certainly, how can they be any better? We're watching Buford, and he cannot get to it. Here is Clemente again, on his way for three. Belanger, off the mark.
Today, the runners would be coasting into second with the double.
Well, that man can run for 37 years old. Here's his swing now.
The Pirates couldn't score Clemente then, but when he came to bat in the top of the third, he didn't need any help in making the score 2-0.
Right, and back Frank Robinson up to the wall several times.
Well, Frank's got to make a move on this one. It's gone. Home run Clemente, and the Pirates 2, the Orioles nothing. And what a magnificent performance from Pittsburgh's right fielder, the great Roberto Clemente.
As he had been throughout the series, Clemente was brilliant in the clutch. In the bottom of the ninth, he fielded a Don Buford double, and then unleashed a perfect throw to keep the Orioles from winning the game. As it turned out, the game went into extra innings. The Orioles...
I can't get enough of watching Jersey Mike's freshly grilled hot subs, and I like watching nice and close.
Did you hear that?
Yeah. All right. So if you've never done it, go on to YouTube. Just search Clemente 71 World Series. There are a number of clips on there with those highlights. And you saw that one throw into home plate on the clip. He did another one into third base equally as amazing. You really have to see those throws to appreciate them. You know, if you go to a game today, you might see an outfielder throw a parachute in, and everybody will go ooh and ah, but you know, when you see what a really great outfield arm looked like, it makes a big difference. Remember a guy named Sam Nover? Yeah, he was on Channel 11. He was a sportscaster there. You know, the reason we have a museum, I always tell people this at the museum, you know, obviously Roberto was a great ball player. There are a lot of great ball players. But the reason we have a museum is he was equally as great as a person. So rather than me talking about him, I'm going to show you the end of this interview he did with Sam. This was the last interview, live interview he did. It was in the fall of 1972. And let me just show it to you, and we can talk a little bit about it afterwards.
But you wanted to be with the people.
I want to be with the people that pay my salary. Because I was with my players, I shake hands with them and everything like that. I talk to them that how happy I was and everything like that. But
Bobby, at 38 years old and 18 years in the major leagues and having accomplished just about everything there is to accomplish in baseball, I guess the thought enters your mind that one of these days it's going to be all over. Do you have any idea now when it will be over, and when it comes, what are you going to do with your life? What would you like to do?
What I would be, I tell you the truth, I never think about that. People always ask me, how much money do you have? What's going to happen to you? Are you secure? I don't worry about that, Sam. The only thing I worry is about being healthy. If I can live, if I can, for example, have my health, I could work. I don't care if I'm a janitor. I don't care if I drive a cab. As long as I have a decent job, I will work. I know like some of the fellows that they've been rich and they lost everything that they have and they killed themselves because of the money. So to me, I can be a person like me today that I'm making pretty good money, but at the same time, I live a life of the common fellows. I know the big shot. If you go outside the ballpark, you're never going to see me trying to put a show or try to call the attention for anybody, because that's the way I am. I'm a quiet fellow, and you see me with the same people all the time. If you want to be my friend, you got to prove to me that you want to be my friend, and you want to be aware that I need lots of time when I play baseball. Now, in the winter time, we can be as long as you want to be with me in the winter time. We can spend as much time as you want to be. But in the summertime, then we have to cut it short. So I would say that I don't worry about what I'm going to do after I start playing baseball. Probably I will stay in some capacity in baseball. And but I said to you, I don't worry one way or the other. I just worry that I be healthy. I live it long enough to educate my sons and make them respect people. I respect them. And this is something that to me, this is my biggest worry, is to live, to my kids to be a person, everybody, when they look at them, respect them, and they vice versa, they respect the people.
Bobby, what do you want for your 2 sons, 3 sons, really? What do you want for them out of life?
I want them to enjoy life the way I enjoy life. I love people, and I love the minority people. I love people that they are not big shots. I like common people. I like workers. I like people that suffer, because these people, they have a different approach of life, of the people that they really have everything in life, that sometimes they get bored because they have everything and they don't know what suffering is in life. So I want my kids to suffer. I want them to have what they're supposed to have, but I don't want them to be rich. I want them to be people like the normal people in America and the normal people in the whole world.
Bobby, I can only say 30 minutes has gone like 5 minutes, and thank you for making it perhaps the most memorable 30 minutes of my...
So there's some interesting things in there, right? You know, he talks about the common people. I'm going to pick up on that in a little bit. Talks about he would like his kids to suffer. That sort of foreshadowed, I'm sure, what actually happened. When he was here in Pittsburgh, you know, just again to kind of illustrate who he was as a person, unannounced, he would go to the School for the Blind out in Oakland. He would go to Children's Hospital. Interact with the kids and tell the teachers, doctors, nurses, look, I want no publicity. If the media starts showing up, I'm going to stop coming. That's not what I'm here to do. So that's really who he was. You know, his passion obviously was baseball. His second passion was children. You probably know he wanted to establish a sports city down in Puerto Rico where kids could come and play some ball, do some other athletic things, maybe learn a little bit. Vera did follow through on it and establish it. Unfortunately, it was built on a swamp. And so even before the hurricanes came through, it ran into bad times. It still exists today, but just a shadow of what it was. There's a couple old ball fields. There's movement to restore it, but the government and the Clemente family are not seeing eye to eye on how to make that happen. So we just hope they can have a meeting of minds and figure out a way to restore it so that Roberto's dream is realized. Do you remember where you were when you heard the news? I think everybody that was here in Pittsburgh on that New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, 73, probably remembers when they first heard the news that Roberto's plane had crashed into the ocean. I was waking up New Year's Day and heard the news from my mom and dad. I'm sure, like a lot of you, it couldn't be. He was going to emerge from the ocean. Of course, that never happened. I'm going to show you this video clip, and then I'm going to tell you some of the story of how all that came to be.
December 23rd, a massive earthquake struck Nicaragua. Nearly 10,000 people were killed, and some 250,000 were left homeless. Roberto had managed the Puerto Rican team in Nicaragua a month before, and he immediately decided to help the relief effort.
Como me ha dicho Roberto, nos pusieron el corazón de Nicaragua a los pies de los puertorriqueños.
The day he went to get a plane to go to Nicaragua, everybody say no, don't take that plane. No.
It's Neil Walker's father.
The day itself, helping load the plane, and I can still see it in my mind. I've never been able to erase it. I still have an image of Roberto that is stuck with me, alive, and I'm grateful for that. But I'm deeply saddened that I was there. I was probably one of the last people to see him alive. Probably the last baseball player to see him alive.
Good evening. Another plane crash last night. A 4-engine DC-7 loaded with supplies for Nicaraguan earthquake victims fell into the ocean after takeoff from San Juan, Puerto Rico.
3 in the morning, they called my house. I answered the telephone. And they said, "You know the news?" I said, "What news?" Roberto crashed.
Among 5 persons aboard, Pittsburgh Pirates baseball superstar Roberto Clemente.
God, it can't be real. It's still disbelief. That can't be right. Clemente can't go down in a plane crash. That can't happen.
Clemente was a national hero, and probably most of the people are waiting that one way or the other he walks out of the ocean or comes out back again.
The ocean was rough. I feel like I had to participate. I cry. I say, I think we're never gonna find anything.
Go.
This was inauguration day for Puerto Rican Governor Rafael Hernandez Colon, but the governor canceled all celebrations as a sign of respect for Clemente.
I'm very proud that I pray with him. And I'm very proud that we are from the same country, Puerto Rico.
Pleasant surprise for me to see Cepeda doing so well.
Last year I was in Peru. I was watching the news and they showed 3 people: Gandhi, Luther King, and Roberto Clemente. Roberto Clemente is the Jackie Robinson of all Latino ball players.
There have been a few guys that played at different levels. There's a Mantle or a DiMaggio or a Willie Mays or a Henry Aaron. Clemente was in that class. But will they have the other aspects? Will they have died so dramatically? Will their stories last for 40 years? Their complete story, not just their playing? I don't know. Clemente's has.
So let me give you a little more of the story of what actually happened. So as you heard from the video, Roberto had been in Nicaragua in early December. He was managing a Puerto Rican team in a junior baseball tournament there. You heard him say on the Sam Nover interview he didn't like the big shots. He liked to talk to the common people. So when he was in Nicaragua in the mornings, he would take walks in the barrios. He would encounter people, talk to them about their lives and their struggles, so that when that earthquake hit, he did volunteer to lead the relief effort on behalf of the Puerto Rican people. Now, of course, everybody by that time in Puerto Rico knew Roberto, so with his involvement and encouragement, a lot of contributions came in, and several plane loads did go to Managua. But the word comes back to Roberto that none of those supplies were getting to those people. Nicaragua was led by a military dictator named Somoza. As the supplies were coming in, the military was confiscating them and selling them on the black market. That's when Roberto became determined that the next load that went, he would personally accompany it, make sure those supplies were getting to where they were intended to go. Now the plane, Roberto signs a contract for a big DC-7 plane. The planes that had previously gone over were DC-3s, a little bit smaller. Roberto meets a guy named Arthur Rivero, who had just purchased the plane earlier that year. He had been advised that he should have replaced the engine in that plane because it was old, it was past its useful life. He didn't. Roberto meets him. He sells Roberto on the notion that he has a bigger plane, he can fit more goods on it. Roberto buys it, signs the contract. The plane was overloaded, in part because the pilot of the plane had flown overnight back and forth to Miami to keep a commitment that he had. So he was sleeping in the cabin of the plane while it was being loaded instead of monitoring that loading process. He took the plane out about 3 o'clock on the runway. Warning lights came on inside the plane. He had to take the plane back. Repairs had to be made. Took the plane out about 8 o'clock, taxied it down the runway, barely got it off the ground. It actually clipped a palm tree at the end of the runway. Got out over the ocean, never got more than 200-300 feet into the air. He knew he wasn't going to make it. He tried to turn the plane around to come back, and of course didn't make it. It nosedived into the ocean and broke completely apart on impact. Probably everybody perished on impact. The only body ever recovered was the pilot's. Only trace of Roberto was a sock that Vera claimed belonged to him. There's some other stories out there, but essentially nothing. And as you saw in the video, Manny, who was his protege on the team at the time, didn't even participate in the funeral service because he was in a wetsuit diving into the ocean, trying to find anything that could be found, but nothing ever was. So that's the story. I'm going to wrap up here in just a minute, but I want to shamelessly show you a video on the museum. It's about 6 minutes in length, but you'll get a good feel for the owner of the museum. You'll recognize, I think, some other people in the video, and at that point then we'll wrap up and be happy to answer any questions you have and maybe hear some stories from you. So let's take a look at the museum. And I think we're
FanDuel selects the Kentucky Derby.
He has a home run. He has not been three. He has.
How do I know you'll be good enough for my son? Well, you see, he enjoys the finer things in life, like his...
My name is Dwayne Reeder. I'm the executive director of the Clemente Museum in Pittsburgh. I came from the mountains north of Pittsburgh. When I grew up, it was all Pirates all the way. Everybody wanted to be number 21. We had him up on this pedestal that he was larger than life. We couldn't barely get to the stadium. We were just far enough out of town that we could only come every once in a while and see Roberto play. So when I get to walk into Ford Field for the very first time, it's like the whole experience. It's the look and the noise and the smell. It's like out-of-body experience. I was standing on the rail and I was calling his name. Some of the other guys ran by and Roberto came over. He loved to do things for kids. He would sign till the last kid got a signature. Clemente just really was all about helping people and helping kids and leaving an impression because he knew that that would inspire that next generation then to be like that themselves.
Everybody's dead and they want Bobby to get that big number 3,000. Mentwek on the 0-1. Bobby hits a dive into the gap in left center field. There she is. A double for Roberto.
To get 3,000 hits, exactly 3,000 hits, that's kind of like the exclamation point. That kind of locks in the love for Roberto Clemente that the Pittsburgh people have here.
Another plane crash last night. A 4-engine DC-7 loaded with supplies for Nicaraguan earthquake victims fell into the ocean after takeoff from San Juan, Puerto Rico. Among 5 persons aboard, Pittsburgh Pirates baseball superstar Roberto Clemente.
I just remember it being a kind of a cold, crappy day. One of the saddest days in my life. I was just walking around outside by myself thinking, there's no way he could be dead. He's got to be alive. He's got to come out of that water. He's going to be swimming out. He's going to be standing on the shore, flexing his muscles, and then it never happened. We just couldn't believe that a superhero like Roberto Clemente would die in a little plane crash. So here we have one of the propellers from the plane that Roberto Clemente died in. This piece was found at the bottom of the ocean back in '72. The earthquake in Nicaragua hits on December 23rd. Roberto's coaching the San Juan Senators, and he had just been in Nicaragua coaching the Puerto Rican baseball team. And so he made friends over there. He met all these poor kids. So he thought, I have to get this stuff to those people that he met. That's why he was so hell-bent on going on that plane.
There was a largeness about Clemente's persona that transcended baseball. Not only was he a great player, obviously, but one of the good people who was using his stature and his celebrity to help the people from which he had come. And the plane went down. It's so sudden. It's over so immediately.
We're sitting here in the middle of the Clemente Museum. Kind of built this museum almost by myself, with helps of, friends and relatives. We started it just as a collection of photographs. It's an archive for 10 years, and then it kind of started growing, and I become friends with Vera Clemente. In 2006, when she asked me to host the Clemente family party here, I was honored. During that party, she said, hey, Dwayne, it's more than an archive now. It's like a museum here. So I thought, wow, how cool would that be to be the Clemente Museum? I just wanted to do something more for Roberto than anybody else out there was doing. Everybody wants to collect something from when they were a child. These were the things that I love. Clemente's baseball cards and his memorabilia. And now I'm surrounded by it. When you come to this building, people right away are like identifying with their youth. It just kind of grew, and now I can't stop. I mean, I can't wait to get up every morning and get down here and start looking up for a new negative or start getting an auction catalog and seeing if there's anything Clemente out there that I can either buy or trade for or acquire somehow, no matter what it takes.
Clemente is the icon of Pittsburgh. You can talk about all the Steelers in the world, but down deep, Roberto is the grace note of Pittsburgh. He's the most beautiful athlete who's ever played here. He was grace in motion, he was our Willie Mays. The guys who played with him, Manny Sanguian, for them to come in and talk to you, to look you in the eyes and say, yeah, this is what Clemente was like, is incredible.
He was the greatest ball player I ever seen play, plus he's a great person too. He treats people like a human being. He loves people. That's the way Roberto Clemente was.
That's why we're doing this. It's not that he got 3,000 hits. It's the person that he was. When Anthony Rizzo came here, he said, Dwayne, I want to win the Clemente Award. And he did. The Clemente Award is given to the best humanitarian in the league. So I've been blessed to have all the visiting teams that come into Pittsburgh kind of seek me out and come over. Puig comes here. He came 4 years in a row now. We've had Mike O'Keefe. We've had Steve Carell. We had Eddie Vedder of Pearl Jam. People just gravitate to Roberto Clemente.
For me, Dwayne is the dude who keeps carrying the torch. He's like, never forget, never forget. I still get goosebumps when I can pick up a Roberto Clemente bat. I mean, I can hold a bat in my hand that he used.
This is like the closest thing that I'll ever get now that he's passed away. You can't shake his hand, you can't have a conversation with him, but you can feel something he held in his hands. I can link myself to Roberto and hold this bat, and get a great feeling out of it. I'll pull it out of the case and let players swing this and get that feeling too.
Makes you feel a fuller sense that we are all a part of the people who came before us. And that's the magic of time going by, and maybe people aren't dead after all because something lives on in their spirit, and you're a part of that.
So to wrap up, so please come down and visit us sometime. That is on the wall of the building. And today there is a Clemente Award that you heard Dwayne talk about for off-the-field contributions. Back in 1970, Roberto won something called the Tris Speaker Award. That one doesn't exist today, but it basically was the forerunner of today's Clemente Award. Roberto got to go to Houston, Texas. He got to make some after-dinner remarks, and it was during that speech that he used that quote. He said, anytime you have an opportunity in life to help somebody coming behind you and you don't, you're wasting your time on earth. That's who he was. That's why we have a museum for him. I'll get to you in just a second. If you'd like, I brought some stuff with me. If anybody wants to swing a replica Roberto Clemente bat, don't hit anything, but it's over there. You guys played, you'll recognize that it's a pretty heavy bat. 36 inches long, 38, 39 ounces. He used a very heavy baseball bat at the end of his career. There's also some calendars over there. Don't get too excited. They're 2022 calendars, but if you want a calendar that has some clippings on it, like almost on a daily basis of things that happened to Roberto in his career, it's in that calendar. They're free. Please go ahead and take one if you'd like. I have the first question in the back of the room.
Yeah, a short story followed by a question. When I was in high school, I had an uncle who was a Catholic priest I was very close to. We spent a lot of time together, and he took me to ball games. And Clemente was my favorite. And he challenged me to do a biography of Clemente, and I did some research, and I wound up typing a 20-page biography of Clemente. Well, it was mid-season in the late 50s or maybe 1960, and it was the winter, and I mailed the 20-page bio to the Pittsburgh Baseball Club and kind of wrote it off. And a few months later, from Marine boot camp, I got a letter, a 4-page handwritten letter from Roberto, which he signed Roberto, but the return address block said R.C. Walker. Can you explain where the Walker came from?
Yes, sir.
Because I never saw it anywhere ever referred to or in print.
If you go to Cooperstown and look at his plaque in the Hall of Fame, it's Roberto Clemente Walker. The way Latinos present their names is the father's surname goes first, followed by the mother's surname. So it was Melchor Clemente Luisa Walker. So the way Latinos present the name, it's Roberto Clemente Walker.
So that was his grandmother's name?
That was his mother's maiden name.
Mother's, okay.
And quick, guys, how many letters in that? 21, yep. That's where the number comes from.
Okay, who else? Hey, Ken.
Thank you.
Do you have any videos of the landscaping that Roberto would do in the batter's box?
You know, I don't have a video of that, but you guys, I'm sure many of you remember. When he would come up to bat, remember he would always do this stuff? Remember he had the reputation of being a hypochondriac?
Yes.
Part of that, and part of it was true, but another part of that was New Year's Eve of '54, so it's another irony of sorts. One of his brothers was in the hospital. He had a brain tumor. Roberto was on his way to visit. The car he was in was rammed from behind. Now, you know, back in the 50s, of course, we could do x-rays. There were no such things as MRIs. So all that stuff, you know, soft tissue injury stuff never got diagnosed. And we have a letter in the museum from the Pirates team physician. Roberto had been complaining about this, and his name was Joe Feingold. And his letter essentially says, well, we'll take his tonsils out to see if that'll help solve that. But I don't think we should tell him anything about this because it may cause additional psychological complaints. So no, they didn't believe it was physical, and you know, guys, don't miss the point. It's the 50s, he was of color, he was Latino, and there was expectations being attached to that.
Yeah.
Here we are.
I had the good fortune through my family. My father and mother were really huge baseball fans. And I probably was doing some mental gymnastics talking to my friends here. I probably saw Clemente well over 100 times in his career. And the two things that stand out to me, I happened to be there. One was when he broke Bob Gidson's leg. I was standing behind home plate when that ball was hit. It was a rocket. The other that I remember was when he threw Willie Mays out. Willie going from first to third, probably the greatest throw in baseball, I think some people think. Is there any video of either of those events?
We have a picture in the museum of Gibson on the ground after that. I don't know anything about the Willie Mays situation. You know something? Oh, okay.
Did he have a house of residence here in Pittsburgh, and what neighborhood?
Well, it wasn't a house, because he would always move back to San Juan in the off-season. When he came to Pittsburgh, before he was married, if you know the old Shenley High School building, he lived up above it. He rented a room up there from a woman that owned a home. After he was married, they moved to the Penley Park Apartments, which is on the corner of Penn and Negley. It's a vacant lot now. And this was the mid-'60s. If you remember back then, the Pirates had pretty good Latin contingent. Matty Alou, Manny Mota, Jose Pagan. Manny Sanguillen came a little bit later. That's where they all lived, because that's where Roberto was. And then when Three Rivers opened, he moved to Chatham West, just off of Banksville Road. But, you know, they were summer quarters, essentially, and then he would go back home to Puerto Rico. Yeah.
One question. You said that only one body was recovered from that crash. Now, was the currents that strong in that area that was sent out to sea?
Yeah, you had three things going on. Number one, the ocean shelf deepened very quickly off the shore. There was a heavy undertow, and they were shark infested.
Did they ever even the plane was gone?
No, there's parts of the plane parts were discovered. That's how we got the propeller into the museum. It broke apart, so the plane was not intact. There was parts everywhere. But there were plane parts recovered, but the only body was the pilot's. Yeah.
A small, barely related point, but Clemente's roommate, back when I guess they had to share rooms, right. His roommate was his backup, Roman Mejias. Yes. And I looked up Mejias by chance on the internet about a week ago and discovered he died about 2 months ago.
He was Cuban. He was up and down. He was there when Clemente came, then he went back and forth, and then eventually he went in the expansion draft to what Colt 45s at the time. But they were, when Roberto came, let me think about this, I think they were the only two people of color on the team at the time. Even in that 1960 team, there was Roberto, Joe Christopher, and Gene Baker were the only three. Yes?
One of the first baseball cards that I got was 1957 Roberto Clemente card, in which he was described as Bob Clemente.
Yeah, didn't like it. So we have a collection of baseball cards in the museum. A gentleman that is a collector has allowed us to display his collection of Clemente cards.
Prince always called him Bobby.
Yeah, so here's the story. You know, Pop's 55 card, he's Roberto, 56, he's Roberto. Then he becomes Bob until about 1970. Now, Topps told him they couldn't fit Roberto on the card, which, of course, you know, he knew was BS. And so you bring up Bob Prince. Now, when Roberto comes to Pittsburgh, think about it. It's 1955. Roberto was 20 years old. He had lived in San Juan, a little bit in Montreal. I'd submit to you guys, and some of you remember, that neither San Juan nor Montreal were anything like Pittsburgh in 1955. So he comes here, he doesn't know a soul. Doesn't know anything about the city, doesn't know his way around, doesn't know food, culture, nothing. Bob Prince was the guy that took him under his wing. introduced him around town, helped him adjust. They became really good friends, close friends. In fact, in 72, Roberto, in the fall of 72, invited Bob to Puerto Rico, honored him at a dinner, and presented him with one of his silver bats for being a friend for all those years. Now, you're right, when Bob would broadcast the game, about anything could come out. He might call him Roberto, but just as apt to call him Robbie, Bobby, Bob, anything. Roberto was okay because he knew that Bob Prince accepted him for who he was. But if he thought he had to be Bob because somehow that magically would make him smarter or more culturally acceptable, that's what he resented. When teams come here to play the Pirates, they'll send a contingent over to see the museum, typically. Always the Latin players. It doesn't matter if they're Dominican, Puerto Rican, Cuban, Venezuelan. Think about this, guys. 50 years later, he is still revered throughout Latin America. Not because he was the first Latin player, he wasn't. But he was the first that played with that outspoken pride in his heritage. Yeah.
I remember reading in the sports pages back then how one writer in particular would write it the way he heard it.
Les Biederman, Pittsburgh Press.
Yep. And how Clemente was very incensed about that and talked to the guy about, you're not portraying what I'm saying. I know what I'm saying, but you're putting the accent in. And then that guy changed it. The other thing I was struck by was one of the national announcers being just, flabbergasted by the play that Clemente was making, that we were taking that as routine. It was just like Mario Lemieux, Every game he'd do something spectacular that you never saw before, but to us, it was normal.
There's a story
to the rest of America. All
71 World Series. Remember there was a writer for the press, I think his name was Roy McHugh, might have the first name wrong. So he's in the press box. Roberto, of course, that was, still probably greatest World Series anybody ever played. He's sitting beside a guy named Jim Murray. Now, Jim was a big writer for the LA Times, very well known. And Roberto did something, and Murray made a comment, "Did you ever see that before?" And Hugh said, "Yeah, all the time."
God.
When I first started in practice, a person in the building that I was in was named Al Capelli, and he was Clemente's dentist. He was his best friend was Bob Prince. So, but when you went to get on the elevator, if you were getting on the elevator at the same time, if there was a woman there, he always put his hand out, stopped the door, let the woman on in the front, and then he let the elevator door close. And he was a very courteous person to.
There are so many stories. I had, and people come to the museum and tell us these stories. I had a guy that came in a few weeks ago, told a story that when he was he and his brother were kids, they had snuck into the stadium, or I think stayed after. They had hidden themselves after the game. And Roberto emerged, I think, for an interview or something. And so they pop out. They want to try to talk to him. Well, some adult obviously said, no, you can't do that. You got to get out of here. But the kid overheard Roberto give this guy his phone number. So he memorized it. He went home that night and he called him. And they went through, almost every night. They would call Roberto and he would talk to him. So.
Okay, Gary.
Got one in the corner, maybe one
other
more?
Okay. Our newest member.
When is the museum open, and is there a cost to the museum?
There is. It's I know you'll probably appreciate this. It's $21. And it's, the museum, it's, first of all, understood it's privately held. So it's not affiliated with the Pirates, not affiliated with the Carnegie Museums, Heinz History Center, all privately held. So it operates pretty much on a shoestring. So we're not open to the public all the time, regular hours. But what you do is you go to our website, click on Book a Tour, and then we have tours set up days and times, at least 1 month and often 2 months in advance. And you can sign up for any of those. We also do events. And in fact, if you want to get a group to come down, you can give us a call. We'll try to set up a daytime to do that. We do wine tastings and tours, because in the basement of the museum is a winery. Dwayne also makes wine. And we do professional groups, birthdays, anniversaries, rehearsal dinners. I've actually seen a wedding take place in the museum. Yeah.
Do you have a minimum on the tour?
Not really. We usually like to try to get half a dozen or more. It's generally not an issue.
Okay, wrap-up time. Gary, thank you very much.
You guys.
Excellent
Thank you, guys.
presentation.